Hey there, Big Data Beard fans. We are back at Splunk's .conf 23 in Las Vegas. As you know, the Big Data Beard team does love to go to a technology conference, one of our favorite things in the world. And in the last 3 years, since the Big Data Beard was kind of on a hiatus, we haven't not been doing anything. One of the things that has consumed a significant amount of time for myself and Kyle and Mr. Rob Castley, who's joining us today from Splunk, is focus on sim racing. Sim racing, the idea of a racing simulator, video game, and getting good at it. And I wanted to share a little bit about this data drivers program that the Big Data Beard team has been involved in some cases, but that Splunk has been driving forward. And so I invited Rob to join us. Rob, you are a little bit of a Formula One fan, is that accurate?
Just a tiny one, yeah, probably for ever since I can remember. Going back to a child, going to the Grand Prix at Brands Hatch, that shows how long ago.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
When Formula One was racing around Brands Hatch. So,
They actually did that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I do love that.
They had a full Grand Prix circuit.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, huge fan. Huge.
Awesome. Well, it's so this Big Data Beard, or excuse me, this data drivers program was born out of this idea that we wanted to get data out of sim racing. Actually, was started by the Big Data Beard's virtual race to .conf that we did in 20, whenever we were all remote, and we wanted to have some fun. So we started tinkering with getting data out of these games. But it kind of lined up nicely because Splunk is a big sponsor of McLaren's Formula One team, and we wanted to see how we could make that real. So, yeah. So Rob, tell us about like what's the big story behind Splunk sponsoring McLaren at a big picture level?
So for the partnership with Splunk and McLaren, we are able to get down and dirty with them on the data,
Yeah.
and be able to get insights into how they work with the data that they collect within the platform. It's made significant changes in the motorsport world for them, on how they're able to perform, and post-race analysis to be able to look at the data and understand where they can improve things, not just with the drivers, but with the cars themselves as well.
Excellent.
Yeah, we actually help with what they call the third car. So in Formula One, you have two cars, but you actually have a third one, which is affectionately the IT rig that travels with them to F1 circuits. And what that's doing is that's all the custom applications that are used by the manufacturers and the sensors that they look at trackside. So if you've seen them, in the paddock, you can see all the graphs and visualizations lined up. Well, because of Formula One's cost cap, we want to be able to reuse that data, look at that data, be able to not have to generate more data by driving a car, but be able to look at that data retrospectively. So we actually send that data from trackside, from the third car, back to McLaren's Technology Center in Woking, where they have a team of strategists that can actually look at the data in real time and replay it back and get more insights out of it just from real time and retrospective.
So data is truly providing some competitive advantage. That's the story I'm hearing, which is cool.
Yeah.
One thing that I'm curious though is Splunk's not actually getting all the data from the sensors. It's monitoring, like you said, it's the third car, the actual service.
Correct, yeah. So we leave the sensors and the monitoring of those and the visualizations of race analytics, to the people who do that daily, right?
Yeah.
But what we want to do is grab that data and have those sensors act as a forwarder, and those apps act as a forwarder to us.
Okay.
And then we take that data from trackside before they move the rig again and get that back safely into the MTC. So that way, it's moved, because data is valuable, especially when we have a cost limitation per F1 season.
For sure.
Yeah, so in addition, though, to the track, there's also esports.
Correct.
What is McLaren doing with esports?
Yeah, so McLaren's company as a whole, right, their goal, their business objective is to win races and increase revenue.
Yeah.
Makes sense,
Makes
right?
sense.
Makes
Well,
sense.
you increase revenue by winning races, meaning if we're only stuck on Formula One, we're only doing about 20 some odd races a year, right? But if we can expand out, which they've done, you've seen it with Aero McLaren IndyCar team. You've seen it with McLaren Formula E. You've seen it with a number of other areas that they're working in, one of which being esports, because esports naturally has a low cost to it, right?
Yeah.
There's not a physical car to worry about, and then it helps grab talent. So yeah, it's really impressive to see what's going on. And esports, it's not just video games. It's not just kids playing. It's actually larger than music and movies industries combined.
Wow.
So it's a large total addressable market for McLaren to go in and earn more revenue. So it makes complete sense from that perspective. And it's not just McLaren that's doing it from a Formula One perspective. Every one of the 10 constructors in Formula One has an esports team.
Wow.
So they're actually able to race around in the Formula One circuits as well during the season. So it's pretty interesting to watch on top of that. So if you're looking for a race fix, check out esports as well for some good sim racing.
Yeah, F1esports.com is where all that stuff lands. It's quite interesting. One of the things, though, that you mentioned earlier was data is competitive advantage, right? And we've talked to countless numbers of organizations that have said data is, useful. It's literally how we derive value and go compete in the market more effectively. But how do you do that in esports and specifically in sim racing in the F1 world? How does somebody, actually get data out of that thing to do something useful with it? How does that work, Rob?
Yeah, so great question. We're very fortunate with the game in question, which is the EA Sports F1 franchise series of game.
Yeah.
It provides the ability for you to capture the data via a UDP stream directly out of the game.
Really? Okay.
Yep. So basically, you can go into the settings of the game, into the telemetry, and you just tell the game where to send the data to.
Okay.
You then need a collection engine
Okay.
that is going to take that UDP data, and then it's got to do a little bit of transformation on it to turn it into a payload that you can ingest into a given platform. So in the case of what we do at Data Drivers, we take that data and we turn it into a payload that both Splunk Enterprise, Splunk Cloud can take, and Observability Cloud can take as well.
Okay.
So we've got it going into two different, engines where we can then obviously visualize the data from the games themselves. And on the esports side of thing, if you look at what McLaren achieved last year in the esports series, they won it. And they won it because of the data that we collected for them.
Wow.
Yeah. So they were able to do things like, okay, it's beginning to rain in the game, and we're starting to see lap times decrease, and they were looking at the data that they were collecting and looking at the data of, because you can actually get all the data of all the other drivers in the game as well, so not just your data.
Really?
So they were able to look at all the other drivers and seeing how they were performing, and could make the call to say, right, box, we're going to get some, intermediates on now, and it was just having the game data there and being able to look at it and make those split-second decisions that really helped them seal that championship.
Yeah, so, what kind of data are we talking about? What's the frequency, the size?
Yeah, no, so the data, you can configure the frequency as to how often the data comes in, so you can go like from 60 hertz all the way down to 10 hertz. And then the data that actually comes in is absolutely everything, almost like having a real pit wall screen. You've got tire temps, tire deg, brake temperatures, you've got engine revs, you've got gears, you've got damage, you've got number of laps,
That's mine,
sector
damage.
times. Yeah, it is. When you see all this like on a Splunk dashboard, it's just like being at the pit wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super cool.
It's almost an overwhelming amount of data, and to really start to go, okay, how do we use this strategically?
Yeah.
And there was even some things, I think my favorite data point that we got, or the realization that we had, was in a tire, you were pulling not just tire temp, but the inner, the middle, and the outer tire temp and the variations across that of each tire individually. So just seeing the level of detail in these it's truly not just a video game, but more so a simulation.
Yeah.
So with data drivers, so just give me some numbers. Like, what are you actually doing every second? Like, how much?
Yeah, so we do about, we set it to 10 hertz, so 10 times a second we take a sample, and we do about 300 data points a second.
Wow.
Or 300 data points 10 times a second. So we're doing about 3,000 data points or 3,000 events within a second per car. And to the point earlier, right, every constructor has 2 drivers. So we're doing about 6,000 data points a second for McLaren's 2 drivers. And then if we want to expand that further, we can do it. So it's quite a payload and quite a process to get that data from game up to Splunk. Yeah.
And the really cool thing about it is when the data sent to Splunk Observability Cloud, it is real time.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's like sub-second.
I mean, that's what you
Yeah.
need, right? For
Yeah.
what you're talking about with the use cases around being able to box and all of that
Yeah.
stuff. Like that's super critical.
Yeah.
So what are those? I'm not a. I don't work for McLaren. I've never been on the pit wall. I know a thing or two about cars, and I'm a Formula One fan, obviously. But what in that data set is actually like the most interesting and useful? Because you mentioned that the McLaren Shadow team used Splunk to develop a strategy during a race that ended up helping them win. What kinds of things are they looking at? I know we can get data from a lot of different places, but what was interesting?
So for me, it's always interesting. On a hot, sunny day where track temperatures are high,
Yeah.
tire degradation can be high.
Yeah.
So you'll be looking at the tire deg, across that race because for those that are not familiar with Formula One, you have to change your tires at least once in a given race.
Okay.
Sometimes there are strategies where 2 stops are better than 1 stop, but you'll be looking at tire degradation on those tires and making the call that right, round about lap 17, I need to be in and put a set of mediums on, for example.
Yeah.
So looking at that. Then they'll be looking at lap times, okay? So is the tyre that they're on currently the best tyre compared to looking at data from other drivers that might be on a different tyre strategy?
Okay.
And you'll see it on the TV in real life, is that you'll hear them say, right, plan B, Checo, and it's like, hang on a minute, that's a tyre strategy change.
Oh, okay.
And that can happen in the world of sim racing, exactly.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, data drivers, it's here. It's at Conf. So where can people go to actually share their data, their experiences driving with esports?
Yeah, great question. So if you head down to the Source Pavilion, if you go into the Source Pavilion, you'll find the data drivers stand there. We've got 2 simulators up and running for the conference this week. Just get in the queue, come and put in some best laps. You never know, you might win a prize.
Yeah, and we actually, one cool thing to point out too is we're actually testing the code that we give back to McLaren for the data collection process.
really?
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for all helping us generate some data and test the code live, right?
So you're testing in production.
Well, maybe dev, right?
Yeah, so dev is the conference.
Right,
Production is when you hand it over to McLaren.
Right. We don't
to
have
say.
championships on the line this week, fortunately.
So what track are they racing on?
So we're actually going to be racing Vegas because we are in Vegas. And Rob and I have been working the past few weeks to get this data in. And it's been good fun because my wife will come downstairs and say, "Oh, you're playing video games again?" And, no, I'm working.
Yeah.
But it's been an absolute pleasure to work with Rob, and it's pretty wild this day and age. We're actually developing, across the Atlantic from each other with me in Nashville and him outside London. So it's been really wild to, play video games, write code with somebody who's not even in the same continent as you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's worked really well, super well. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
So I have to ask, and this might be a little bit of a wedge between the friendship here, but who's the fastest driver out of the 3 of you?
Ooh, are we talking racing dirty or clean
Hey.
racing? I think that might
we don't need to
change.
go back and look at the virtual race to comp from 20.
No,
It's
never.
not-
Well,
Yeah.
as of now, I've put down a 135 round Vegas, so you've got to try and beat that.
I haven't been in the seat yet, but I have a feeling that's going to be pretty hard to beat. So I did like that, Kyle. You mentioned something there that you were able to use video games in your day job to support McLaren so that you could play video games at home more often.
Yeah.
Brilliant strategy.
Works
I
well.
love that. Now, I'm curious, what's next for data drivers? Have you guys done any recent trips anywhere that you wanted to preview and tell folks about?
We just got back from the McLaren Technology Center, where we were able to film a video for the Las Vegas Grand Prix. We were able to showcase to see how resilient our drivers are. And it was an absolutely wonderful experience. That is just a beautiful,
Stunning.
beautiful building and headquarters there. And I think I had an absolute blast. You had a decent time too, Rob.
What was it like
right?
meeting Lando and Oscar? He's speechless. I love it. Yeah, it was quite stunning, but it's a fun thing to be a part of, seeing data brought to sim racing and esports.
And yeah, and one thing for the future of data drivers.
Yeah, for sure. I did ask that question.
Absolutely asking that. One thing that if you are looking to get your hands on with racing data, we have a couple different episodes at boo.splunk.com where you can actually play with racing data through Splunk Enterprise and Splunk Ollie Cloud and Splunk ITSI. So if you do want to get your hands on with the data, that's a wonderful way to do it. Rob and I will be testing out F1 2023 to get more data out of it and see what else we can get, because as the game changes, the data changes. So we want to make sure we're giving the best product out there. So stay tuned and see what else we find in the code.
I like it. Well, it's been fun to chat about the partnership between Splunk and McLaren. Clearly cool to highlight. Even neater to hear how data is being used for competitive advantage, thanks to some brilliant technologists. So thank you for the work, and thanks for letting me be part of it and talk about it. I do encourage you all to check out, again, if you're at the Source or at the .conf this week with us here in Las Vegas, swing by that Source Pavilion, get your hands on the wheel, see if you can beat Rob Castley's 135, which seems like a pretty fast time. And stay tuned for other conferences. I think at some of the other ones later this year, you'll see those McLaren simulators pop up in the Splunk booths as well. And hopefully, even more interesting data being brought to life using Splunk. So thanks so much for listening to this Big Data Beard podcast, and stay tuned for more from Splunk's .conf 23 live from Las Vegas.